Can emptiness be full? The core paradox in Buddhism. What if everything you know is wrong? Have you ever paused, just for a moment, to truly look at the world around you? Not just a quick glance, but a deep observation. We tend to navigate life with a set of assumptions, ideas we often take for granted. We see a chair, we sit on it, and we call it a chair. Simple, right? But what if I told you that this chair isn't quite as solid or as real as you perceive? What if your very understanding of what a chair is, or even what you are, is based on a foundation that's not as fixed as it seems? This isn't a trick question or a philosophical puzzle. It's a question that has been at the core of Buddhist thought for centuries, and it all starts with a concept called Śūnyatā, often translated as emptiness. When we hear the word emptiness, we might imagine a void, a nothingness. But in Buddhism, Śūnyatā isn't about something being absent. It's about something far more profound. The idea that all things lack intrinsic existence. What does this mean? It means that nothing exists on its own, independently. Everything arises due to causes and conditions. Consider a flower, for instance. Is it a flower simply because it is a flower? Or is it a flower because of the seed it came from, the soil it grows in, the sun and rain that nourish it, the bees that pollinate it? The Buddha, in the Samyutta Nikaya, often used the analogy of a flame. It's not an entity in itself, but a process dependent on fuel, oxygen, and heat. Similarly, a flower is only a flower because of the interplay of these factors. If you take away the seed, the soil, the sun, can you still call it a flower? The Buddhist notion of emptiness suggests that the flower doesn't have a fixed, permanent flowerness inside it. It exists because of a web of interconnected factors. This concept can feel a little strange initially. It's like realizing that the ground you thought was solid is actually a constantly shifting landscape. But let's delve deeper to make it clearer. Let's consider a scientific analogy. Think about an atom. If you could zoom in incredibly close, you'd find atoms, and atoms are mostly empty space. The nucleus and electrons are so small and far apart that it's mostly void. Now, it's important to understand that this is just an analogy to help us visualize the idea of non-solidity. Śūnyatā is not the same as physical emptiness. This analogy helps us realize that even something seemingly solid is made possible by interdependence. This idea of things depending on each other is a key teaching in Buddhism called dependent origination, or pratitya samutpada. It's often expressed as, when this exists, that arises. When this ceases, that ceases. It's a simple but profound statement that teaches us everything is interconnected. Everything arises from a network of causes and conditions. Your very thoughts, for example, arise from the interaction of your brain, your past experiences, and your current environment. This teaching shows that nothing exists in isolation. So, what does this mean in daily life? Does it mean that nothing matters? Quite the opposite, actually. Emptiness isn't about things being nothing. It's about seeing the potential in everything. The Buddha once said, "All conditioned things are impermanent." It's a powerful statement that underscores the dynamic nature of reality. When we understand that things are not fixed, we are able to see the potential for change and transformation. Like a river that is always flowing, yet always remains a river, everything is in a state of constant movement and becoming. Śūnyatā, in this sense, is filled with potential, a gateway to infinite possibilities. It's not a dead end, but a starting point. Perhaps by understanding this, we can begin to see the world and ourselves with fresh eyes, ready to embrace the ever-changing dance of life. How can emptiness create everything? We've explored the idea that things are empty of a fixed, independent existence, arising due to causes and conditions. Now, let's address the core question head-on. If things are empty, how do they manifest? How can something that, in a sense, isn't really there, create something that is? It's a paradox, yes, but it's a paradox that reveals a profound truth about the nature of reality. The key is to understand that śūnyatā, emptiness, isn't a state of nothingness. It's not a void where existence ceases. Instead, it's the very potential for all things to be. It's the absence of inherent independent existence that allows for the constant flux and change we experience as reality. Śūnyatā is not the absence of things, but the absence of a fixed, independent essence. This absence allows for relationships, and through relationships, things manifest. It's like a blank canvas. It's not a picture itself, but the possibility for countless pictures to be painted upon it. So how does this emptiness give rise to manifestation? It's not a simple equation of nothing creating something. Instead, it's about the dynamic interplay of potential and conditions. Śūnyatā, or emptiness, is not a denial of existence, but a statement about the nature of existence. Because things are empty of intrinsic essence, they are free to arise in connection with causes and conditions. Emptiness is the condition that makes interdependence and transformation possible. Just as a blank canvas can hold infinite paintings, emptiness allows for infinite forms to manifest through relationships. Think of it like this. A seed, on its own, isn't a tree. It's empty of inherent treeness. But it holds the potential to become a tree if the right conditions are present: soil, water, sunlight. Śūnyatā is this potential, the openness to possibility that allows for the arising of all phenomena. It's the lack of inherent existence that allows for the constant arising and passing away of everything we perceive. Because things are empty of independent existence, they are free to arise and change through causes and conditions. Emptiness makes transformation and creation possible. To illustrate further, let's consider a connection with modern science, specifically quantum physics. Again, it's important to note that this is an analogy, not a direct equivalence, to help us understand the concept of potentiality. In quantum mechanics, particles don't have definite properties until they are observed or measured. Before this point, they exist as a wave of possibilities, a field of potential. When an interaction occurs, this potential collapses into a specific manifestation. This mirrors the Buddhist idea that things don't have fixed, inherent existence, but rather manifest through the interaction of causes and conditions. It's not that these particles come from nothing, but that they emerge from a field of potential when specific conditions are met. This might feel paradoxical. How can emptiness create? But consider this. It is precisely because things lack fixed essence that they can adapt, change, and arise. A seed has no independent treeness, yet through soil, water, and sunlight, it manifests as a tree. Similarly, our reality is a flowing process of dependent origination, where emptiness enables things to continuously arise and dissolve. Let's consider a bustling city. It's not just a collection of buildings and streets. It's a dynamic interplay of people, businesses, transportation, and countless other elements. Each part depends on the others, and the city as a whole is more than the sum of its parts. It's a constant flow of activity, a perfect example of how things arise, not from a solid pre-existing essence, but from the dynamic interplay of emptiness and conditions. The city is constantly evolving, changing, adapting, and yet remains a city. Perhaps, by understanding this, we can begin to see that the world is not a static collection of objects, but a dynamic and ever-changing field of possibilities. It is a realm where potential is constantly unfolding, where the absence of fixed essence allows for infinite creativity and change. And perhaps, in this understanding, we can find ourselves more attuned to the rhythm of existence, more open to the constant dance of arising and passing away, recognizing that we are all, in our own way, expressions of this boundless potential. What does it mean to have no self? We've explored emptiness, how things lack a fixed, independent essence, and how everything arises through interconnected causes and conditions. Now we turn to a concept that can feel deeply personal and challenging: anatta, or non-self. This idea that there is no permanent, unchanging self can be unsettling. It can feel like we're being asked to give up something fundamental to our very being. But understanding non-self is not about giving up, but about seeing the truth of our existence, and it can be a path to liberation and a deeper understanding of reality. The Buddha taught that what we commonly perceive as the self is not a fixed, independent entity. Instead, it's a collection of constantly changing processes, our thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, all shaped by causes and conditions. It's like a river, always flowing, always changing. There's a continuity, but no fixed, unchanging substance. We often cling to the idea of a solid, enduring I, but this is an illusion. Now, it's crucial to understand that non-self doesn't mean that nothing exists. It doesn't mean that you are not real or that your experiences are meaningless. What it does mean is that there is no permanent, unchanging core, no separate, independent soul or essence that exists apart from the processes of life. So, what does it mean to have no self in practice? It means that we are not defined by a fixed identity, but by the ever-changing flow of experience. It means we don't need to cling to a static image of ourselves. It means we can accept change without feeling a sense of loss. It means we can live with more flexibility and freedom. It means we are not separate from the world, but deeply interconnected with it. It means that our sense of I is a construct, a story we tell ourselves rather than a fixed reality, and that we are free to rewrite that story. To understand this further, let's explore insights from modern neuroscience. Neuroscience shows that the self is not located in a single place in the brain. Instead, it's an emergent phenomenon. Our thoughts, memories, and personality arise from the complex and constantly changing activity of neural networks. Neuroplasticity demonstrates how the brain rewires itself based on our experiences, showing that our self is not static, but constantly adapting and evolving. This aligns with the Buddhist concept of impermanence. Like a song that is always changing as it is played, our brains and ourselves are in a constant state of flux. This is a perspective that complements, but does not prove, the Buddhist concept of non-self. But what about your unique personality, your unique experiences. If there's no fixed self, what makes you you? It's a good question, and it's one that often leads to confusion. The answer isn't that your experiences don't matter, but that they're all part of the flow, the ever-changing river of your life. They are what shape your current experience, but they are not a fixed you. What makes you unique is the particular combination of experiences, emotions, and conditions that come together at this moment in time. But this combination is always changing. To illustrate this, think of a live musical performance. The music is made up of individual notes and instruments, all blending together to create a unique and dynamic experience. Each performance is different, even if it's the same song, because the musicians, the audience, and the environment are always changing. Similarly, our lives are a constant flow of experiences, and we are the expression of that flow. Understanding non-self can be challenging, because we are so deeply conditioned to believe in a solid, enduring I. We tend to identify with our thoughts, our feelings, our roles, and our possessions. But these are all constantly changing. When we cling to these fleeting things as mine or me, we create suffering. When we see that there is no fixed self, we begin to let go of the need to defend, protect, and control this illusion of me. We begin to see that we are not separate from the world around us, but an integral part of it. This understanding of non-self can lead to a profound sense of freedom. It's not a freedom from responsibility, but a freedom from the burden of clinging to a fixed identity. It's like letting go of a heavy backpack you've been carrying for years. When we see that there is no permanent I to defend, we can move through life with more compassion, more openness, and more acceptance. In fact, recognizing our interconnectedness through non-self actually increases our sense of responsibility, because we understand that our actions affect others and the world around us. And perhaps, in this understanding, we can simply allow ourselves to be a unique expression of this ever-changing flow. If you're empty, what's left? We've journeyed through some profound ideas. We've explored emptiness, the interconnectedness of all things, and the concept of non-self. And now, we arrive at perhaps the most fundamental question of all. If you're empty of a fixed self, if all things are interconnected and constantly changing, what remains? What is the point of it all? It's a question that can bring a sense of unease, perhaps even a little fear. If we are not who we thought we were, then who are we? It's important to understand that the Buddhist understanding of emptiness and non-self is not meant to lead to nihilism or a sense of meaninglessness. It's not about saying that nothing matters. Instead, it's about freeing ourselves from the limitations of our fixed ideas about ourselves and the world. It's about discovering a deeper sense of freedom and connection. When we let go of our attachment to a solid, unchanging identity, we begin to experience a profound lightness. It's not a lightness of being irresponsible or uncaring. It's a lightness that comes from no longer having to defend, protect, and maintain a fixed idea of who we are. It's a freedom from the burden of a self that we constantly try to define and control. It's like finally putting down a heavy weight you've been carrying for years. Modern research is beginning to show us the benefits of this kind of letting go. Studies have found that people who practice mindfulness and acceptance tend to experience reduced stress, improved well-being, and greater resilience in the face of life's challenges. When we stop clinging to our thoughts and emotions as if they are permanent truths, we create space for greater peace and clarity. So, if you're empty of a fixed self, what remains? What remains is the boundless potential of the present moment. What remains is the freedom to be fully present, fully alive, without the constraints of a rigid identity. What remains is the infinite interconnectedness of all things. The profound sense that we are not separate from the world around us, but an integral part of it. It's like the ocean itself. It is constantly changing, constantly in motion, yet it is always the ocean. It is defined not by its fixed form, but by its dynamic process. Similarly, we are defined not by a fixed self, but by the continuous flow of our experiences. When we let go of the need for a solid, unchanging self, we discover that we are more than we ever imagined. We are a part of something much larger, something much more profound. This is not a loss. It's a liberation. It's a gateway to boundless potential, infinite connections, and ultimate truth. It's an invitation to live with more compassion, more openness, and more joy. As an old saying goes, empty yourself of everything, let the mind rest in peace. This saying, often attributed to early Buddhist teachings, encourages us to let go of our fixed ideas and find peace in the present moment. When we empty ourselves of our fixed ideas, we find a peace that is beyond words, a peace that is the very heart of existence. It is in this space of openness, this space of emptiness, that we discover the fullness of life. And in this discovery, we find our true selves, not as separate entities, but as an integral part of the ever-moving, ever-changing ocean of existence.